Tagta scratched at the thick brown fur along his muzzle as he lumbered through the stadium corridor, each heavy step making the metal floor creak. He had to turn sideways to squeeze through the row of seats, his bulk bumping against other spectators despite his best efforts. The reinforced chair groaned as he dropped into it. He wasn't sure why his clutch mate kept dragging him into GFC fights. They were okay to watch, he guessed, but after a while it was just aliens smacking each other until one of them stopped moving. The crowd's roar made his rounded ears perk up. Through the entrance tunnel came a mantellid, its green-black shell gleaming under the lights. Tagta had seen their kind before. The bug-like alien moved in quick, jerky steps, its razor-edged fighting claws held high, while its smaller arms stayed tucked against its body. Its huge eyes seemed to take in everything at once, and its mouth parts clicked together rapidly. "In the red corner," the announcer bellowed. "Weighing 92 units, the swift striker, Kizik Tal." The mantellid's head twitched side to side as it clicked its battle claws together. Tagta shifted in his seat, making himself comfy for what he figured would be another normal match. "And in the blue corner," the announcer went on, "in his first GFC fight, weighing 85 units, the human hurricane, Mike Reeves." Tagta's small eyes squinted as he watched something new walk out. He'd never seen anything like it. It walked on two legs, straight up and down, wearing some kind of tight clothes that showed off its weird shape. It didn't have any claws or armor or anything, just pink skin and funny-looking limbs. "What's a human?" Tagta growled at his clutchmate, scratching his belly through his thick fur. "You guys," his clutchmate grunted back, "from some tough planet or something." Tagta snorted. The human didn't look tough at all. No claws, no teeth, no thick hide, nothing. Just a flat face with features all bunched up in the middle. The only weird thing was how it moved, smooth like a hunter. A long-eared referee, some prey species Tagta didn't know, called them to the middle. The fighters were about the same height, but the mantellid's fighting claws gave it longer reach. "Might be good," Tagta mumbled, wondering how the human would handle those quick strikes mantellids were known for. The bell rang. What happened next made Tagta's jaw drop. The mantellid's claw shot out fast as lightning, but somehow the human wasn't there anymore. It'd move aside quick as a blink, and then Tagta's eyes got big. It hit back. The punch looked simple enough, just a straight hit to the mantellid's middle, but instead of bouncing off the hard shell like most punches did, this one landed with a crack so loud Tagta could hear it over the crowd. The mantellid stumbled back, its huge eyes flashing with panic. Before it could get away, the human hit it again, and again, each punch landing exactly where it aimed. Tagta found himself standing up without meaning to. The human wasn't just quick, though it moved fast enough to match the mantellid's speed. It was how hard it hit. Every punch made a sound like rocks smashing together, and Tagta could see the mantellid shell actually bending where the hits landed. "Can't be real," he muttered, watching the mantellid try to get away. The human was only a little bit lighter, but it hit something twice as big. It didn't make any sense. The fight ended fast. The mantolid got scared and tried to hit with both claws at once. The human ducked under them and punched up into the spot where the mantolid's head met its body. The crack was so loud it hurt Tacta's ears. The mantolid fell over, its legs twitching. The referee started counting while the human just stood there, breathing easy like it had gone for a walk. The bug alien tried to get up, but kept falling over, its legs all wobbling wrong. "Winner by knockout!" the announcer yelled. "Mike Reeves!" Tacta dropped back in his chair, his mind all jumbled up. He'd seen lots of fights, but nothing like this. How could something so normal-looking hit so hard? What kind of place did humans come from? He needed to learn more. Looking at his own huge paws, big enough to crush a melon, Tacta felt strange. For the first time ever, he wondered if being big wasn't as important as he always thought. 3 weeks after seeing his first human fight, Tacta was back at the arena, his thick claws clutching a datapad filled with GFC match records. His clutchmate trudged behind him, grumbling. "Don't see why we gotta come so early," his clutchmate whined. "Seats ain't going nowhere." Tacta ignored him, busy reading about Mike Reeves' second victory last week. He'd missed that fight because of work, but the highlights were amazing. The human had knocked out some kind of squid-armed fighter that was bigger than a mantolid. "Look," Tacta rumbled, shoving the datapad at his clutchmate. "Says here humans come from a planet with real heavy gravity. That's why they're so strong." His clutchmate just yawned, showing off yellow teeth. Since when do you care about science stuff?" Tacta's ears flattened. "Just interesting, is all." They found their seats. Tacta had paid extra for the big ones near the front this time. He wanted a better view. While they waited, he kept reading, his thick claw carefully tapping through articles about human biology. Most of it didn't make sense to him, but he got the basic idea. Humans had evolved somewhat tough, which made them tough too. The arena filled up slowly. Tacta barely even noticed. Too busy watching old fight clips from his pad, from Earth's private fighting ring. Each one showed the same thing. The human moving fast as lightning, hitting way harder than something his size should be able to. It's what the other humans knew him for. "In the red corner!" the announcer's voice finally boomed, making Tacta's head snap. "Standing at 97 units at the very top of featherweight, with 12 victories, the living cyclone, Rex the Raptor!" A blur of scales and feathers bounded into the ring. The Raptor, that's what they called themselves, bounced from foot to foot, its tail helping it balance as it showed off with fancy kicks. Tacta had seen this one fight before. Real quick, real mean. "And in the blue corner, already with 2 victories in his rookie season, standing at 85 units, the human hurricane, Mike Reeves." The crowd went wild. Rex was a fan favorite to begin with, and Reeves is already making waves as a rising star. Tacta leaned forward, so far he almost fell out of his seat. The human looked the same as last time. Small, pink, kinda squishy looking. But now, Tacta knew better. He watched closer, noticing things he'd missed before. The way the human's muscles moved under its skin, how its feet stayed planted just right. The scary, calm look in its eyes. "Gonna be good," Tacta mumbled. elbowing his clutchmate who'd started dozing off. The bell rang. The raptor lived up to its name, moving in fast cycles, throwing those famous kicks. But the human just turned in place, hands up, watching. Tagta recognized that look now, the same look his pa had when he was taught how to hunt. The first kick came high and fast, aimed at the human's head, quick as a snap. The human's arms went up, caught the leg, and then crack! The punch that followed was so fast Tagta almost missed it, but nobody missed the sound it made when it landed. The raptor squawked, stumbling back on its good leg. The other one dragged a bit now. Tagta didn't care before, but he learned recently that GFC only calls matches on knockout, surrender, or injuries bad enough to keep the fighter down. As long as they can stand and want to fight, they're in. The human followed, not rushing, just carefully stepping forward with that same calm look. The raptor's next kick came slower, more careful. The human slipped past it, like water moving around a rock. What happened next had Tagta up on his feet, roaring with the rest of the crowd. The human stepped in close, real close. Closer than Tagta had ever seen anyone get to the raptor, and just started hitting. No wild or angry, but smooth and steady, like he was working a job. Each punch landed with the same scary crack, and the raptor's fancy movements got slower and slower. "Look at that," Tagta bellowed, shaking his clutchmate. "Right in close where the kicks don't work. Smart!" The end came when the raptor tried to jump back for space. Its hurt leg buckled and the human pounced. 2 quick body shots and then a hook that caught the raptor right in the jaw. Down it went, all tangled up in its limbs. The referee hadn't even finished counting when Tagta started pulling up the league rankings on his pad. The human was moving fast, and Tagta wanted to know who he might fight next. His clutchmate gave him a funny look. "You're really into this now, huh?" Tagta nodded, not looking up from his pad. "Gonna buy season tickets tomorrow? You don't gotta come if you don't want. What happened to just aliens hitting each other?" Tagta's muzzle wrinkled and thought. "This is different," he said finally. "This human, he's different. It feels important." He scratched his head trying to find the right words. "Like, maybe we all have been thinking about fighting wrong this whole time." "If you say so," his clutchmate yawned. "Wake me up when the next bout starts." But Tagta barely heard him. He was already checking prices for better seats at the next stadium. More expensive, but totally worth it. He had a feeling the human was just getting started, and he didn't want to miss what came next. Morphonian's tail twitched in irritation as he reviewed the match statistics again. Something wasn't adding up. He'd watched every featherweight bout in GFC history, kept records of every fighter's measurements, and tracked every trend. After 15 years of following the sport, he could spot pattern changes from a parsec away. His claws clicked against the display, pulling up Mike Reeves' previous matches. 3 wins, all knockouts, each against progressively larger opponents. That itself wasn't too strange. Plenty of fighters worked their way up the ranks. But the weight gaps. "They're testing him," Morphonian muttered. His long-scaled jaw worked side to side like it always did when he was thinking hard, causing his upper teeth on the right to clack against the lower teeth to the left. Tonight's opponent was officially listed at 102 units, technically still featherweight, but right at the division's ceiling. Meanwhile, the human remained at 85 units, same as his debut. The arena's familiar roar pulled him from his thoughts. Marthonian settled deeper into his seat, ignoring the usual complaints about his tail taking up too much space. His webbed fingers worked quickly, setting up his personal recording device. He never missed a chance to add new footage to his collection. "In the red corner!" The announcer's voice carried the same energy it had since Marthonian's first started attending matches. "Standing at 102 units, with 15 victories by submission, the coiler, Skiff!" The Visonian slithered into the ring, muscular coils rippling as it raised the upper portion of its tube of a body in a traditional display. Marthonian's eyes narrowed. Skiff was good. Really good. A prominent grappler known for wearing opponents down with those powerful coils before finishing them off. But more importantly, he was big for the division. Too big, by the old standards. And in the blue corner, undefeated in his rookie season with 3 knockouts, the human hurricane, Mike Reeves. Typical fanfare from the crowd. The human entered with the same focused energy Marthonian had noted in previous matches. But something was different tonight. The stance was a bit wider. The guard held slightly higher. Adjustments for a larger opponent, Marthonian realized, already scribbling notes. The fighters met in the center. The size difference was obvious now. The Visonian's raised body towered over the human. Marthonian's rich tail curled with anticipation. This wasn't just a fight anymore. This was a test. At the bell, Skiff struck first, just like Marthonian expected. The Visonian's famous darting attacks had ended plenty of fights early, but the human slipped the strike with an ease that made Marthonian stood up straighter. Not just dodged, countered, landing 2 sharp hooks that actually pushed the larger fighter back. "No way," Marthonian whispered, leaning forward. He'd seen every trick in GFC history, but this was new. The human wasn't just trading shots, he was controlling space, forcing the Visonian to coil defensively instead of attacking. Every time Skiff tried to establish his rhythm, a precise combination would disrupt his position. By the second round, Marthonian was frantically taking notes. The human had figured out the exact range where he could land shots while staying just far enough to slink out of the way before Skiff could coil around him. It was masterful ring control, but that wasn't what had Marthonian's scales itching. It was the raw power behind each strike. "Those aren't featherweight hits," he muttered, watching Skiff's reactions. The Visonian was tough, famous for it, actually. But every clean shot from the human was rocking him against someone 17 units heavier. The end came in the 3rd round. Skiff, frustrated and wearing down, committed to a full-body lunge. The human sprawled perfectly. Another adjustment Marthonian noted, and then unleashed a combination that echoed through the arena. The Visonian collapsed, coils going limp. While the crowd roared, Marthonian sat back, mind racing. 4 matches, 4 knockouts, each against a bigger opponent, and now this, dominating a seasoned fighter well above his weight class. They weren't just testing the human, they were trying to find his limits. His claws clicked rapidly across his datapad, pulling up the next match's details. His eyes widened at the opponent's weight. "They're not even pretending anymore," he growled softly. Something big was happening in the GFC. The weight classes were changing, the old records becoming meaningless, and it all centered around this human who hit like a heavyweight while weighing less than most juveniles. Marthonian's tail coiled tight with excitement. In 15 years of watching fights, he'd never seen anything like this. Marthonian hunched over his collection of datapads in the arena's research center. His thick tail curled around the base of his chair for balance. The lighting was poor, probably why most fans didn't bother with a dusty archive room, but his eyes were built for dark places. His scaled fingers moved between screens, comparing numbers that made his throat rumble with growling suspicion. Official weight ranges by division, 5 cycles ago. He read from the oldest pad. Featherweight, 80 to 95 units. He shifted to another screen. 3 cycles ago, 80 to 98 units. His claw clenched as he checked the most recent update. Current range, 80 to 105 units. The changes were subtle. 1 or 2 units here, 3 units there. The kind of adjustments most fans wouldn't notice or care about. But Marthonian had spent too many years tracking fighter statistics to miss what it meant. A message notification blinked on his personal pad. His contact in the betting circles had come through. The odds for tonight's match filled the screen, making a scaled brow ridge furrow. The human was favored, against an opponent 20 units heavier. Though not even waiting for an approval anymore. His throat loosed a low guttural rumble, like aerated water gulping down a hose as he pulled up the official division guidelines. The latest revision was dated 3 days ago, right after Reeves's last victory. The changes used to take weeks of committee review. The archive room's door creaked open. Marthonian's head snapped up, but it was only the cleaning drone. He relaxed, though his claws still clicked nervously against his desk. What he'd found wasn't exactly secret, but it wasn't the kind of thing the GFC liked fans digging into. His eyes drifted to the promotional poster for tonight's match. The size difference between the fighters were obvious, even in the stylized art. When a human had first joined the circuit, something like this would have been unthinkable. Now it was becoming normal. The worst part was that nobody seemed to question it. Fans cheered the spectacular knockouts, bookmakers adjusted their odds, commentators praised the human's pound-for-pound power, without asking why he kept fighting bigger opponents. Marthonian's tail twitched as he recalled his first reaction to seeing a human fight. He dismissed the victories as clever technique, maybe some unique fighting style that caught opponents off guard. But 4 matches in, with every opponent larger than the last? This was something else. An alert chimed. 30 minutes until the first bout. Marthonian gathered his pads, careful to return the archive materials to their proper places. As he headed for his seat, his mind raced through the implications. The GFC was rewriting the rules of the sport around him. The question was why? What had they seen in human fighters that made them so willing to bend regulations that had stood for decades? And more importantly, how far would they go? Settling in his usual spot, Marthonian pulled up his recording equipment with practiced ease. The answers would be in the ring soon enough. His claws hovered over the controls, ready to capture every detail of what promised to be another historic night. Vanya's long ears twitched at the sound of crushing equipment from the medical bay. Her sensitive hearing picked up a rumble of an angry Ursican, even through the thick walls. She sighed, tugging and straightening her scanty referee uniform before pushing open the door. Craig sat on a reinforced examination table, his massive brown furred frame making it look like children's furniture. A toppled tray of medical instruments lay scattered across the floor, his small eyes fixed on her as she entered, and his lips pulled back to show yellow teeth. "Come to check if I'm allowed to fight again?" he growled. "Or just making sure the human didn't hit me too hard?" Vienna's pink nose twitched, picking up the sharp scent of antiseptic and frustrated predator. Her powerful leg muscles tensed instinctively, but she kept her voice steady. Actually, I wanted to discuss what happened in there. Sometimes taking about a loss helps. Loss? Craig's massive paw slammed into the table, leaving a dent. That wasn't a loss, that was impossible. I don't care what anyone says about gravity or muscle density or whatever other excuses they're making. Nobody that small hits that hard, not naturally. Variana hopped onto a stool, bringing herself closer to eye level with the seated Urzagan. Her ears swept back, a calming gesture she'd learned working with most species. I've refereed 15 of Mike Reeves' matches now. I've been closer to the action than anyone. What you experienced wasn't unique. She pulled out her official datapad, bringing up the match statistics. Your size and mass advantage was actually slightly below average for his recent fights. Last month he knocked out a Grenaton with almost 5 times his mass. That's my point! Craig's claws dug into the table's edge. It's not possible. The rules were written before we met humans. Vajana cut in, her nose twitching again. I was there for his first match, you know? Back when we still thought weight classes mattered. We assumed mass and power had to correlate. She paused, whiskers quivering at the memory. I knew something was different the first time I saw him hit someone. The sound it made. I'd never heard anything like that in all my years in the ring. Craig's ears flattened. So what are you saying? We're just supposed to accept that some tiny pink-skinned alien can walk in and ignore physics? Physics? Vajana's ears perked up. Did you know I studied xenobiology in university? If you want to talk about kinesiology, they are fascinating, actually. The muscle fiber density alone. Dicerson's growl cut her off. I don't need a science lesson. I need to know why the GFC keeps throwing fighters into impossible matches. Vajana's whiskers drooped. Because they're not impossible matches. That's what we're all trying to understand. Every time we think we found the limit, some size gap that's too big to overcome, he proves us wrong. They're rewriting everything we thought we knew about combat sports. She hopped down from the stool, her powerful legs absorbing the impact silently. You're not the first fighter to come to me like this. Everyone wants an explanation. But maybe we're asking the wrong question. Instead of asking how humans can be so strong, maybe we should be asking why we assumed they couldn't be. Craig was quiet for a long moment, his massive frame seeming to deflate slightly. How many? He finally asked. How many matches has he won now? Vajana's ears twitched. 23. No losses, no draws, all but 2 by knockout. Dicerson's eyes widened. And they keep putting him against bigger opponents. They ran out of small ones, Vajana said simply. Nobody in the lower weight classes will fight him anymore. Even the middleweights are starting to refuse matches. Her whiskers quivered with amusement. That's why they came to you heavyweights. Craig looked down at his paws, each one larger than the human's entire torso. And we are not enough either, are we? Vajana's ears swept back sympathetically. The GFC committee meets next week to discuss creating a new division. But between you and me? She glanced at the door before continuing. I don't think it'll help. Some things just can't be sorted into neat categories. Humans might be one of them. Vajana had to again adjust her revealing referee uniform as she made her way down to the arena's back corridors, her sensitive ears picking up the distant roar of the crowd above. The medical bay had been her first stop after the matches ended. It always was these days, but now she had somewhere else to be. Her powerful legs carried her quickly to the GFC's administrative section. Her nose twitched at the sterile scent as she approached the conference room. Inside, raised voices were already arguing about tonight's results. 3 heavyweight knockouts in one night? The operation director's voice carried through the door. The betting systems are in chaos. The rankings make no sense anymore. We have to do something. Vajana's ears tilted forward as she slipped into the room. The committee members barely noticed her entrance. They were too focused on the holoscreen displaying tonight's match footage. She recognized the sequence. Craig hadn't been the only Ursican to fall tonight. The power differential simply doesn't track with any known physiological patterns, one of the scientific advisors was saying, his tentacles gesturing at various data points. Even accounting for the high-gravity evolution doesn't matter anymore. Vajana cut in, her nose twitching and as all eyes turned to her. What matters is reality, and the reality is that humans are stronger than we thought possible. The operations director's facial scales flushed. Referee Vajana, we didn't request. No, but you need me here. Her ears swept back confidently. I've been in the ring for the most of Mike Reeves' matches. I've seen what he can do up close, closer than anyone in this room. She hopped onto the conference table, her powerful legs making it look effortless, and despite being wildly inappropriate for the context, the directors didn't seem to mind the show, even as she stood to correct them. With quick movements, she pulled up her own footage on the holoscreen, recordings from the referee's perspective. Look at the impact ripples here. She pointed to slow-motion footage of One Punch. The force distribution isn't just about muscle mass, it's about efficiency. Humans don't just hit hard, they hit right. The scientific advisor's tentacles curled skeptically. But the mass differential means nothing. Vajana's whiskers quivered with barely contained intensity. I studied xenobiology before joining the GFC. I know what the models say about size and strength ratios, but humans don't care about our models. She switched to another clip. This one from tonight. Watch Craig's reaction here. That's 340 units of pure Ursican muscle experiencing something we all thought was impossible. The room fell silent as they watched the massive fighter collapse from a punch thrown by someone a quarter his size. The heavyweights are refusing matches now, the operations director finally said. Even with triple pay, they're saying it's not worth the embarrassment. Vajana's ears drooped slightly. Can you blame them? We keep moving the goalposts, pushing Mike into higher weight classes, thinking surely this time it'll be too much. And every time, he proves us wrong. The scientific advisor finished, his tentacles going limp. Exactly. Vajana's nose twitched as she called up the match statistics. 23 wins, 0 losses, against opponents ranging from 89 to 512 units. The pattern is clear. Weight classes don't mean anything when it comes to humans. The operation director's scales shifted colors in agitation. So what do you suggest? We can't just throw an entire classification system. Maybe we have to, Vajana said softly. Her ears swiveled as she heard familiar footsteps in the hallway. But you might want to decide quickly, because if I'm not mistaken, that's Mike's manager coming in to discuss his next contract. And after tonight, her whiskers twitched. I don't think he's going to settle for heavyweight purses anymore. Dave Barnes watched Mike work the heavy bag, his weathered face creased with focus. 30 years of coaching had left their mark in the deep lines around his pale blue eyes and the silver threading through his close-cropped black hair. His broad shoulders, still powerful despite his 60-plus years, remained squared with the same rigid posture he'd learned in his Marines days. Mike Reeves moved like liquid mercury in front of him, copper-brown skin gleaming with sweat under the gym lights. The kid was built like a compressed spring, every inch of his 5'8" frame wrapped in lean, coiled muscle. His square jaw was set in concentration, dark eyes intense beneath close-cropped black curls, as each strike landed with measured precision. Even after 23 straight wins, he trained like he was still hunting for his first victory. "Your cross is dropping," Dave called out, the familiar graveler's voice echoing through the empty gym. He noted the slight tell on Mike's shoulder, visible in the bunch and flecks of seasoned fighter's muscle beneath smooth skin. "Remember what I told you about these bigger opponents? Can't give away anything." "Griggan's different from the others," Dave said, walking closer to the bag. "Most heavyweights we've faced try to overwhelm you with pure mass. This one knows how to fight." Mike stepped back from the bag, unwrapping his hands with practiced efficiency. "Show me." Dave projected the footage onto the gym's main screen. Griggan moved with surprising grace for something his size, his bark-like exterior flexing as he dispatched opponent after opponent. "Watch his footwork here," Dave pointed. "Stays balanced even when he's pressing forward, and those limbs aren't just for show. He can generate power from any angle." Mike studied the footage intently, taking slow sips from his water bottle. "Different structure than what we're used to. More like a tree than a regular body." "Exactly," Dave nodded. "Which means standard body shots might not work the same way. We need to figure out where his center of mass is. Find his weak spots in that strange anatomy." He pulled up another clip, this one showing Griggan absorbing a massive hit without flinching. "See that? Regular strikes just bounce off that outer layer. But here," he paused the footage, highlighting a particular area. "When shots land in his joints between segments, there's give." "Like chopping a tree at the right spot," Mike mused, shadowboxing a new combination. Dave watched his fighter test different angles, already adapting his technique. In 30 years of coaching, he'd never seen anyone pick up things as quickly as Mike. But then again, he'd never coached anyone quite like him before. "You know what's funny?" Dave said, switching off the footage. "Back in UFC, we used to talk about pound-for-pound rankings like they meant something, comparing fighters across weight classes, trying to figure out who was technically the best regardless of size." He shook his head. "Never thought I'd see the day when it wasn't just a theoretical concept." Mike paused his shadowboxing. "You think that's why they keep putting me against bigger opponents? Trying to find the limit?" "They won't find it," Dave said firmly. "What these aliens don't understand is that humans didn't evolve to be the biggest or the strongest. We evolved to adapt, to overcome. Every time they move the goalposts, you'll just find a way to win." He walked over to check Mike's hand wraps. "Remember your first GFC fight? Everyone thought you were too small, too fragile. Now they're running out big guys willing to face you," he chuckled. "Imagine trying to explain that to my old UFC colleagues, that our featherweight champion is knocking out the alien heavyweights." "Speaking of heavyweights," Mike nodded toward the screen where Griggan's image was frozen mid-strike. "What's the game plan for this one?" Dave's eyes lit up with a familiar fire of tactical planning. "First, we need to work on your defensive movement. His reach is longer than anything you've faced yet. But I noticed a lag in his recovery time after those big swings." Dave's fingers, scarred from decades of mitt-work, traced the holographic outline of Griggan's stance. The gym's evening shadows stretched long across the floor as he and Mike sat reviewing footage. empty protein shakes scattered around them. His pale blue eyes narrowed at a particular sequence. "Look at this recovery pattern," he said, his weathered face inches from the projection. "Every time he loads up that right side, there's a quarter second where his root system shifts." Mike leaned forward, dark curls still damp from the earlier session. His copper skin had that healthy post-workout shine as he'd studied the movement. "Like he's replanning himself?" "Exactly." Dave's broad frame strained with satisfaction. "These tree folk, they got incredible structural integrity, but they need solid contact with the ground. That's why none of them ever developed any real head movement." He rewound the footage, pointing with one thick finger. "See how he keeps his lower segments locked? That's not just a habit, it's a necessity. The moment one of those segments lifts, his whole balance changes." Mike's dark eyes tracked the pattern, his fighter's mind already processing the implications. "So we attack during the transition, when he's shifting weight." Dave nodded, silver-threaded hair catching the gym's fluorescent light. "That's only half the equation. Look at his opponent here. Good fighter. Strong technique, but he's trying to muscle through that outer layer. Might as well punch a redwood." He pulled up another clip, this one from a different angle. A massive tree-like alien was employing some kind of spinning attack, his bark-like exterior rippling with the motion. "His species evolved with that armor for a reason," Dave continued, rubbing the stubble on his squared jaw. "But armor's got to flex, especially for a fighter. And anywhere somewhere flexes, there's a weak point," Mike finished, his compact frame already shifting into a new stance as he visualized the attack. "Bingo!" Dave's marine straight posture relaxed slightly. "Between segments, where the armor has to bend, hit him there, right as he's transitioning weight, and all that size works against him." Mike rose, muscle coiling smoothly as he walked through the timing. "Like threading a needle." "A needle the size of a parking meter." Dave's gravelly voice carried a note of dry humor. "But yeah, same principle." He stood as well, all joints cracking as he moved to hold a focus mitt. "Show me the sequence you're thinking of." Mike's response was a blur of precise movement, each strike flowing into the next. Dave's experienced hands absorbed the impacts, feeling the measured power behind each one. The kid had always been technical, but lately there was something more, an efficiency of motion that seemed almost inhuman. "Ease up on that last right," Dave called out, lines deepening around his eyes as he analyzed the combination. "We need speed there more than power. Remember, you're not just trying to break through, you're exploiting a gap that's already there." Mike nodded, sweat beginning to bead again on his forehead as he repeated the sequence. This time the final strike came lighter, quicker, better, Dave said, lowering the mitts. "But there's something else we need to talk about." He walked over to the old leather gym bag, joints still moving with military precision despite his age. From a side pocket, he pulled out a small data chip. "Remember when I said Griggin was different?" Dave's pale eyes had that serious look Mike had learned to pay attention to. "I wasn't just talking about his fighting style. This footage just came in from his last training session." A holographic display flickered to life again, showing their opponent working with his own coaching team. Dave's squared shoulders tense as he watched. "He's been studying you, kid. Really studying you. Look at how he's adapted his root system, changed his recovery patterns. This isn't just another heavyweight looking for a payday. This one, he's the real deal." Griggin felt the familiar surge of confidence as he entered the ring, his dense root system anchoring firmly to the reinforced canvas. 540 units of evolved perfection. Every fiber optimized for combat. He briefly glanced around the stadium, his home turf, a massive vaulted building entirely dedicated to GFC championship matches. "They call it the black hole, and it comes with all the appropriate cosmic theming in its jet black architecture, traced by digitally controlled neon lighting, all to draw every eye in the building towards the center of the ring, as inexorably as light is drawn to the singularity. Across the ring, the human, all 85 units of him, moved with a liquid grace that Gregan had studied extensively in preparation for this bout. Still, recordings couldn't quite capture the strangeness of seeing it in person. The human was almost comically small compared to recent opponents, yet something in his movements set off ancient warning signals in Gregan's combat instincts. Ladies, gentlemen, and all in between and besides, you have been caught in the black hole. All that's left for you to do is turn your eyes to the ring, the singularity where all things come to die. The announcer shouted with his usual theatrical gravitas as the lighting in the stadium appeared to flow to the center before cutting out all lights just for a brief moment. Then, the lights flashed back on, but only the spotlights aimed at the ring itself, now expertly highlighting Gregan. At this non-geometric edge of the horizon, the lumber giant, the guardian of the forest, the speaker for the trees, undefeated grand heavyweight champion of the galactic fighting circuit, proud warrior of the giants, and named after his own people, Gregan, the verdant victor. The crowd erupts into a nova of cries and cheers. As usual, an indecipherable mix of positive and negative sentiments. A vibrating boom silences the crowd, and the brightest part of the spotlight shifts to Gregan's opponent. And at this edge of the horizon, the rising comet, the unstoppable force, the rookie that shattered the minds of the galaxy with his unprecedented pound-for-pound power, come to claim the verdant victor's title, the Human Hurricane, Mike Reeves. The stadium booms once again with a cacophony of cheers, even louder than before. The announcer was always good at riling them up. Vajana, the usual referee for both Mike and Gregan, saunters onto the stage holding a holoboard, projecting Bout 1 into the air, in large lettering for all to see, and offers the usual spiel about fight rules and fairness before stepping to the side of the stage. The bell rang. Gregan initiated with a casual probe, his upper segments rotating with well-practiced precision. The human slipped it easily, as expected, but Gregan was already transitioning into a basic combination. No need to show his full capabilities yet. This was just the first of 3 rounds. But the human was there, then wasn't, then was again. Always just at the edge of Gregan's reach. Each time Gregan committed to an attack, a counter would land in exactly the spot where his armor had to soften for movement. The impacts felt impossibly heavy, each one threatening his carefully maintained balance. Gregan pressed forward, trying to use his superior mass to cut off the escape routes. A sequence that had broken 3 previous champions flowed from his limbs, each strike covering a different angle of retreat. For a moment, he thought he had the human trapped. Then came the response. A combination so fast his visual cortex could barely track it. Impact after impact found the joints between his segments, each one carrying force that something that size shouldn't be able to generate. Gregan felt his root system trying to compensate, felt the subtle shift in his balance that he trained countless hours to prevent. The human saw it too. The finishing sequence was beautiful in its simplicity. A light strike to test his guard, a feint to force a weight shift, and then, just as Gregan's roots began to reset, 3 precise hits that ran up his central column like stepping stones. Griggen had fought hundreds of matches. He faced opponents of every size and shape the galaxy had to offer, but he'd never felt anything like the shock that ran through his system as those strikes landed. His carefully maintained balance crumbled. His segments, evolved over millennia to withstand incredible forces, buckled in sequence. As he fell, a strange thought crossed his mind. This wasn't just about power or technique. This was something else entirely. Something his species, for all their structural perfection, had never achieved. The impact of hitting the canvas resonated through his entire frame. Above him, the human was already moving to his neutral corner, barely showing any signs of exertion. The referee began a count, but Griggen already knew this round was over. His root system wouldn't respond. His armor had cracked in ways his maintenance team had deemed impossible. In his corner, between rounds, Griggen's outer layers creaked as his team applied emergency biosealant to the worst splits. He had underestimated the human, a mistake he would not repeat. The recordings hadn't done justice to the raw force behind those strikes. The way they could find weaknesses in armor tested against opponents 5 times the size. As the bell rang for round 2, Griggen rose with new purpose. No more feeling it out. No more held-back techniques. It was time to show this human what a fully committed warrior of his species could do. The galaxy's greatest fighters didn't earn their reputation by breaking after one lost round. Mike's ribs screamed in protest as he drew a deep breath between rounds. His copper skin slick with sweat under the intense spotlights of the black hole. The second round had been educational. When Griggen stopped holding back, the true gap between champion and challenger became clear. Every movement had been precise, every strike calculated. Mike's advantages in speed and power had barely kept him in the fight. His dark eyes fixed on the maintenance team, swarming around his opponent. Their biosealant applicators worked furiously to repair Griggen's armor, but Mike could see the deeper damage underneath. The champion's segments didn't align quite as smoothly anymore, the result of their brutal exchange. "He's hurting too." Dave's gravelly voice cut through the arena's roar. The old coach's pale eyes studied Mike's battered frame. "With that second rounder, you put it down. You gotta find another gear." Mike nodded, wincing as Dave's weathered hands applied cooling gel to the worst bruises. The last exchange had taught him more about fighting than his entire UFC career. Griggen hadn't just adapted to human techniques, he developed counters specifically for them. That spinning root strike had nearly ended the fight right there. "Final round," Vayana announced, her long ears twitching as she held up the holoboard. The crowd's roar built to a crescendo. As both fighters rose, Mike settled into his stance, feeling a familiar coil of muscle and sinew. Across the ring, Griggen's massive frame creaked as his root system anchored into the canvas. The champion's segments shifted with deadly purpose, every movement expressing the confidence of a fighter who'd never tasted defeat. The bell rang. They met in the center, neither willing to cede ground. Mike slipped Griggen's initial probe, but the counterstrike that followed caught him hard in the ribs. He rolled with it, letting the force carry him into range for a combination they drilled countless times. 3 precise hits to the junction points between segments. Griggen absorbed the impacts, his armor flexing but holding. The champion's response was immediate, a complex sequence of strikes designed to force Mike into a defensive shell. But instead of retreating, Mike stepped inside the attack. Pain exploded across his shoulder as one of Griggen's strikes clipped him, but he was already moving. Dave's voice echoed in his memory. "You're not trying to break through. You're exploiting a gap that's already there." Mike's fist found the hairline crack from round one. The one the biosealant hadn't quite sealed. Griggan's entire frame shuddered. Before the champion could reset his root system, Mike launched into the combination they prepared, not trying to overwhelm with power, but targeting the accumulated damage with surgical precision. Griggan's counter caught him in the jaw, sending stars across his vision, but Mike's body moved on instinct, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought failed. Another strike slipped through Griggan's guard, then another. Each impact resonated through the champion's frame, forcing his segments further out of alignment. The final exchange happened so fast, even Mike's trained eye could barely follow it. Griggan's committed to a desperate root strike, throwing his full mass behind the attack. Mike saw the shift in balance, saw the moment where all that size and power worked against the champion. His finishing combination started low, targeting the stress points they'd identified in training. Each strike built on the damage from previous rounds, creating a cascade of structural failures that ran up Griggan's central column. The champion's armor, tested against the galaxy's strongest fighters, began to buckle. The final blow landed clean. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Griggan's massive frame swayed, his root system desperately trying to compensate. The champion fought it, segments creaking as he attempted to lock them in place, but physics itself had turned against him. The impact when Griggan fell resonated through the entire arena. Mike stumbled to the neutral corner, his own legs barely supporting him. Every breath sent daggers through his ribs. Blood trickled from the split above his eye, but he remained standing. Vajana's count seemed to stretch for an eternity. At 8, Griggan's segments shifted as he tried to rise. At 9, his root system trembled with effort. At 10, the black hole exploded. "Ladies, gentlemen, and all between and besides," the announcer's voice carried equal parts shock and exultation. "The impossible has happened. The comet has struck. We have a new champion." As the medical team rushed in, Mike felt Dave's strong hand steadying him. His coach's weathered face split in a proud grin. "Told you they wouldn't find your limit, kid." Mike managed a tired smile, tasting copper. "They may have to make a new weight class. Call it the human division." Around them, the crowd's roar built to a fever pitch. Somewhere in those stands, Tagta was probably losing his mind. Marthonian would be frantically updating his records. And Vajana? Mike could see the referee's knowing smile. She'd understood what humans were capable of before anyone else. Pound for pound, the deadliest species in the galaxy. And now everyone knows it.